Tory MPs were heading off to campaign in Boris Johnson's old seat of Uxbridge today.
Is Uxbridge, where this train terminates.
Anything rather than commit themselves to voting in the Commons to condemn or exonerate him.
It's like you're trying to avoid Westminster today, is that fair?
No, I'm going straight there after this.
Joy, are you going to be at Westminster later?
Who knows?
Who knows?
Boris Johnson's already quit Parliament and was spending his 59th birthday at his New Oxfordshire home. He sent word out to his remaining supporters in Parliament to boycott the debate and the vote on the Privileges Committee report that condemned him as a repeated liar.
He denied what was true, asserted what was not true, obfuscated and deceived. It is clear he knew the rules and guidance. As Prime Minister, he was telling the country about them nearly every day. He knew that there were gatherings. He was there. He knew that the gatherings breached the rules and the guidance, yet he told the House that the rules and guidance were followed in Number 10 at all times.
I commend the members of the Privileges Committee for their painstaking work and for their dignity in the face of slurs on their integrity. To all the members of the committee, this House should, as the Leader of the House said, say thank you for your service. And I also say to members of my own party that it is doubly important for us to show that we are prepared to act when one of our own, however senior, is found wanting. I will vote in favour of the report of the Privileges Committee. I urge all members of this House to do so.
Rishi Sunak welcoming the Swedish Prime Minister to Downing Street earlier. He's decided to skip the vote.
Are you scared of Boris Johnson, Mr. Sunak?
How are you planning to vote?
Well, this committee was established under the former Prime Minister. It commanded the confidence of the House at the time, and I'm sure that they've done their work thoroughly, and I respect them for that. Obviously, this is a matter for the House, not for the government, and that's why each and individual colleagues will make up their own mind when the time comes.
So are you not going to be there?
I said each and individual colleague will make up their own mind when the time comes.
At the moment, he's just hiding. Just as he passed through the peerage list the other day, he's hiding, sitting on his hands, trying not to be noticed. That's not leadership. That's actually opting out of something which is very, very important.
After video emerged of a party at Tory headquarters from December 2020, when London was under strict COVID restrictions, the Metropolitan Police today said they were considering whether to investigate the Mingle and Jingle party. Amongst those there was Sean Bailey, then running for Mayor of London. Last week, made a peer in Boris Johnson's resignation honours list.
Jingling and mingling, sir. Like, how is that acceptable?
It isn't. I'm not saying it is for a second.
Are you embarrassed that you've been given a peerage despite the fact that you and your staff were so flagrantly partying?
Not me and my staff, which again, I apologise, excuse me, I'm out of breath. I apologise for repeatedly, and I apologise again unreservedly.
Former Prime Ministers were amongst those at Windsor Castle for the annual Order of the Garter service. As the first Prime Minister to be found guilty of repeated contempts of Parliament, Boris Johnson may find some of the trappings of life for former Prime Ministers are refused to him. His protocol wrestles with the novelty of a Prime Minister accorded pariah status by MPs.
And Gary is with me now for what feels like unprecedented times.
Momentous. We know that Boris Johnson is a man who likes his epics and his sagas, and he has written himself one here. Extraordinary scenes in the House of Commons, because although technically they're not expelling him, effectively that is what his fellow members of Parliament are doing. And in there right now there are speakers getting up who are using that word, always gets people thrown out of the House of Commons. Liar, lied, lies. Again and again they're using variations of this, and it tells you how low he has fallen. Another thing that tells you that is how few people there are who are willing to speak up for him in there, and you kind of feel that the fact that they've decided his dwindling number of allies not to try and force a vote on this is because they're afraid their numbers would be exposed to be quite small. Someone else who doesn't particularly want to be seen voting though tonight, as you said, is Rishi Sunak. He has kind of retrofitted his diary to make sure that he can't be here. and voting. If he really wanted to be, he would be. But like quite a lot of other people, and looking at the lack of presence on the front bench there, presumably quite a lot of people in the government, Penny Mordaunt, the Leader of the House, who says she will vote for the committee and the effective expulsion of Boris Johnson and the condemnation of him, might be a rather lonely figure in those lobbies. But it's important to remember this is a man who a year ago was running our country, has been ejected from power by his own party, and is now being brought very low by his own party on his birthday.
Thanks very much, Gary. Well, another of the senior Conservatives who is supporting the Privileges Committee report is Dame Andrea Leadsom, who served as Business Secretary when Boris Johnson was Prime Minister. Thank you for coming to talk to us. Why is it so important to uphold this report?
Essentially, it's a committee of the House. It was established by the House in April 22 by a unanimous majority. So the makeup of the committee is politically balanced. In fact, there's a Conservative majority. And so in my view, as a former Leader of the Commons, but also a real believer in the importance of parliamentary sovereignty, we have to back a properly constituted committee. And it's not right to simply say, well, I don't like its findings, so I'm just going to bring into question its legitimacy.
Is that what people like Jacob Rees-Mogg are doing, do you think?
No, not necessarily. I'm not pointing fingers at anybody, but I just do observe that I believe all MPs need to recognise it's a properly constituted committee. It's gone to great lengths and huge detail over almost a year to come up with clear analysis that shows wrongdoing, and its recommendations, I believe, should be supported by the House.
If you'd have been Prime Minister, you'd have been here tonight, wouldn't you?
Well, you know...
And you might have been, once upon a time. I mean...
It's impossible to say. You know, clearly today is House business. The Prime Minister has another world leader here that he is entertaining and having discussions with.
It's a few minutes away, isn't it? He could come and
yeah,
vote.
but it's not possible to always change schedules. And I think the Prime Minister has made clear that he upholds that committee's findings. So, you know, I'm hopeful that this will go through on the nod rather than having a division.
Yes, you don't want an actual vote, do you? You just want it to go through.
I want all members to accept the validity of that committee's findings.
But given how important this is for Parliament, as you say, and there are people questioning the validity of the report, doesn't it require the Prime Minister to show some leadership and say this is important? And
I think he has made clear that he upholds the work of the committee, and that he is unable to be here. No, I don't really think it's that totemic. As I say, my hope is that this does go through on the nod.
Harriet Harman revealed that the sentence, if you like, was increased because of Boris Johnson's leaking of the findings and his sort of preemptive strike. I mean, you support that as well, do you? I mean, you think
well, again, you know, because
that's what his supporters are angry about.
Well, because I come at this from the perspective of parliamentary sovereignty, in my view, it's essential that principle that we govern our own affairs here and that we are all responsible to the House. And that's why I believe this committee's work must be upheld. And that's why I believe it's not right for it to be sort of falsely accused and for individual members to be rounded upon and told that they're acting politically and in bad faith and so on. Because ultimately, if we lose the credibility of governing our own affairs, then all we're left with is the prospect of having external, non-elected people governing us, and that, of course, is a disaster for any democracy.
Do you fear the sort of the Nadine Dorries retribution, that you might be deselected by your party for speaking in this way?
Well, I've been re-adopted by my local association, but obviously, ultimately, our voters are in charge. They decide whether we get re-elected or not.
They're not angry with you? You're not hearing that?
Some and some. You know, people have different views on all political topics. You know, every day there's always a balance of people feeling one way or the other way on any given topic. So it's no news to hear that people have different views on this too.
Dame Andrea Leadsom, thank you very much indeed. Well, earlier I spoke to one of Boris Johnson's supporters, the Conservative MP Brendan Clarke-Smith, and I began by asking him if the decision of Johnson backing MPs to stay away meant they were cowards.
No, not at all. I think some have arranged in the past to actually do things, some quite legitimate reasons there, and I think campaigning...
But most of them aren't they, in truth? Most of them are just staying away because it's awkward and embarrassing and difficult, you know.
Well, it depends, really. For example, with me, I'm not going to be voting tonight. I'm not going to be taking part in the debate, and I'm not going to be voting one way or the other. So I said I'm completely against
Why?
Well, I'm against the report and its recommendations. I've said why.
So
I've said I would vote against it. Because, as you say, Krish, it's not really right. The number of people that are in here, it's kind of made a bit of a farce of it, I think, to be honest. And in terms of the numbers, I'm not going to play that silly numbers game where someone's going to look at it and say, you know, how many more people voted for than against and all this. You know, if we had a full house here and everybody was here to vote, I think you'd get a more realistic picture. But you're not going to get that today. So really, I think... I wouldn't want to legitimise that vote today.
I mean, that sounds like the truth is his support is so low that the vote would be so embarrassing that it's better for you to just not vote and then sort of not take part in this at all.
Well, I think if you actually did have a vote, and I think if people were actually on the estate, I think the numbers would actually be quite decent and quite split. I mean, as you'll have seen at the weekend, there are people expressing support for the recommendations. Michael Gove actually said that he would abstain, of course. He's another one, as have many other people, for various reasons. So, I mean, people abstain for fair reasons as well. It's not just a case of avoiding a vote. Some people abstain because they're genuinely torn. So I think, in fairness, I respect the way that colleagues vote on things, but for me, this has just turned farcical, which is why I'm not going to be taking part tonight.
Some of your colleagues are voting for the report. Penny Mordaunt has just said that she's voting for it. What do you make of that?
Well, it's entirely up to them. It's a House issue. They're entitled to read the report. They're entitled to their own opinion on it, and I'm not going to criticise people for that. That is their democratic right to do so.
And what do you think the future of Boris Johnson is?
Well, he's one of the great titans of British politics and world politics. I'm sure we haven't seen the last of him.
It's funny you use a phrase like the great titans. I mean, is he really a great titan? I mean, he's just a man who's been drummed out of office, found to be a liar. I mean, how many great titans are there that you would say that about? He's not a great titan, he's just a disaster who's had to leave.
But he's a man who makes things happen and wins elections, whether that was as London Mayor, whether that was with the Brexit referendum, and whether that's with the 2019 general election as well. So there is a hugely influential figure that's there. But yes, a lot of people have moved on. One thing that I'm really keen to emphasise is that this is not a party issue, this is a House issue. And it's perfectly possible to disagree on the House issues and still have a united party that's working together to win the next general election.
Would you have expected the Prime Minister to come here and show a bit of leadership?
Not necessarily on House motions. I think in the past Prime Ministers haven't been there for those as well. He could actually just remove himself from that. Of course, there's some of the argument about FBNs, and he may say that that maybe compromises what he would like to say on it perhaps as well. So I think people should cut the Prime Minister a little bit of slack on the issue.
Brendan Clarke-Smith, thank you very much. Well, with me now is the Labour MP, Dawn Butler, and you were thrown out of the chamber for calling Boris Johnson a liar. And they're all calling him a liar today.
With such freeness and not being thrown out. I mean, but the thing is this, people say there was no evidence. In July 2021, when I called Boris Johnson a liar, was because I was frustrated that he was consistently coming to the House and lying, and yet still there was nothing that we could do to stop him. You know, he knew he was lying, we knew he was lying, he knew we knew he was lying.
So what does it tell you about this place and the rules here? That you got thrown out for that, and then here we are tonight.
The rules need to change. They are too archaic. And Theresa May stood up today and she said how difficult it is as Prime Minister to basically sanction your friends, because you might sanction them one minute and be in the tea room, in the queue with them the next minute. So what I think needs to happen, which I put forward in 2021, is for that to be taken out of the hands of the Prime Minister and put in the hands of Parliament, of the House itself.
But isn't the truth that nothing who has happened today can stop this happening again? Even with the same man,
yeah,
he could be back doing the same thing.
Absolutely, at the moment, and you know, it's taken 2 years to hold a liar to account. Our democracy shouldn't grind that slowly. It should happen a lot quicker than that.
But isn't the flip side of that argument that it's the people really who should have got to decide, not MPs?
Oh No, not really, because the minister's job is to come to Parliament, be at the dispatch box and tell the truth. And if they don't tell the truth, if they tell a lie, even if it's a mistake, they're supposed to come back at the earliest opportunity.
But voters could have judged that for themselves in the next election, and as it is, they can't.
Well, yeah, but Boris should have stayed. I mean, the irony is, if Boris had stayed, then he would have been thrown out of Parliament for lying. But he should have stayed and taken his punishment and then seen what his constituents wanted, if they wanted him to stay or if they wanted him to go. But he threw a hissy fit and he's out. But you're absolutely right. At the moment, we need to change the system. Otherwise, nothing would change, because there are still ministers, like the Home Secretary, telling lies on the floor of the House, and nothing's been done about it.
Allegations she denies, obviously. But Dawn Butler, thank you very much indeed for joining us.